So like there's a spider in your shower. What are you going to name her? And it like changes. It's all of a sudden it's not a spider in your shower. It's Francesca who just came into your shower because it's warm and misty and oops, she didn't realize you would also be using this space, so like it sounds so silly, but it really creates when you give an animal a name, you give them a narrative.
That voice you just heard was Dr. Kathayoon Khalil, and this is Dragonfly Conversations. We highlight everyday people making a real difference in conservation and education. I'm Kevin Matteson, and through my work with Project Dragonfly, I get to share their stories. Today, Kathayoon teaches us how to move past eco-anxiety and rediscover the joy of the natural world. She is a conservation psychologist who bridges the gap between scientific data and human emotion, helping us understand why we care about the things we do. We talk about the danger of doom and gloom statistics, the power of naming those creepy crawlies in our lives, and the beautiful, messy process of how zoos are evolving into centers for social change. Let's get into it. All right, Kathayoon, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here. Happy to join.
So I was reading this morning that there are less than 100 Sumatran rhinos.
Wow, we're just cutting right into that. Great.
Yep, just going right dark, doom and gloom. And I was thinking about telling my daughter this, who's 15. Do you think that is a good strategy for sharing that kind of statistic?
Well, what's your goal?
Well, I guess the goal in that case is like there's very few of this thing left, and it's concerning me. But I guess I just wonder, because I feel like sometimes the assumption has been if we tell people the facts, they'll do the things, they'll become the people that do the things. But I
Wouldn't that
don't
be
know if
nice?
I don't know.
Well, the reason I ask what your goal is because that dictates the information that you share and the what we like to call like educational levers that you pull or the tools you use in your toolkit. If your goal is to share something that you are passionate about with your child, I would redirect to talking to her about your personal connection to Sumatran rhinos, why you care about them, why you care about conservation. If your goal is to get her to care about Sumatran rhinos, I would also ask, what do you want her to do with that care? Do you want her to do more research? Do you want her to start a club at school? Are you just trying to lay that like base attitudinal feeling of conservation motivation? In which case we know that there are a lot of ways of doing that, including knowledge, yes, but also empathy and being able to get people to connect to those animals in very real and tangible ways, being able to understand their lives and their experiences on the planet, which may include some sad stuff, but also includes connecting people to the knowledge that they live their lives. We're not that far away from animals when it comes to what we need and want out of our daily life on planet Earth. So it gets a lot more complicated than like, should I share this very sad statistic? And my answer is almost always no. I don't know what that really does. At best, it gets them to say, oh my God, why? And then you get even worse because you talk about all this stuff that's happening a million miles away. And we risk getting people to feel, especially in this current day and age, deflated, demotivated, discouraged, all those negative outcomes that are actually the opposite of what we want them to do.
Right. And it's interesting because I think when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and like it felt to me when I read about environmental issues like we were 100% not going to have blue whales or pandas.
Yeah.
Like I remember that feeling, and it was scary, I think.
Yeah.
And but yet it was, at least for me, I think it was kind of effective. I mean, and certainly the environmental movement and conservation has, in some areas, prevented species from fully going off the brink of extinction, even if they're just holding on with, unfortunately, a few hundred or 1,000. But I'm just curious, like when you think of conservation psychology, which is like I think of you, Kathayoon, is like being this expert and studying this and thinking about this, like the psychology. It sounds like you're like a psychologist for conservationists, which we probably actually need that too, right?
Porque no
Uh,
los dos.
conservation psychology. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, what is the messaging at
Yeah.
Columbus Zoo and other places you're working, AZA? Like, how are you
Yeah.
guys approaching this now?
Yeah, I mean, step one, I know I said step one is to know your goal, but right alongside that is to know your audience and make sure that your audience matches the goals that you have. So if your audience is your own children, you know those kids better than anybody else in the world, probably. And so you already know what motivates them, how they react to different inputs, whether they tend more towards urgency or they need more time to process. I think, yes, the doom and gloom that we were fed in the 80s and 90s did motivate some people, but it didn't motivate maybe as many people as it could have. It
Hmm.
hit those people who were motivated by urgency, motivated by the idea that everything needs to change right this second and we need to fix it immediately. But I think it left behind a lot of folks who maybe don't, that doesn't appeal to them or that doesn't help them. I am not one of those people. When I hear the urgency and the we need to fix this right now or everything's going to break, I immediately shut down. And I'm like, well, nothing we do really matters anyway. So I just guess I'm not going to make my own life worse to, for what reason? And so in conservation psychology, we talk a lot about knowing our audiences and doing that work and evaluating them from the jump and throughout to be able to understand how our messages are landing. At Columbus Zoo and at a lot of zoos, we focus more on hope and optimism. I feel like that's a swing right now in the conservation movement, that sharing stories of conservation success can be a very effective way of demonstrating why some things have worked and that everything is not failing all of the time, and can get more people, you know, get more people on our side sounds like the wrong, it's not a side thing, but get more people to understand what we're trying to do here. And I think particularly in zoos and aquariums, we know a lot about our audiences, a lot more than we did 20 years ago, and we know they're coming to us to have a positive experience. And so if they're coming to us to have a positive experience, we probably don't want to cram down their throats all this negative stuff. We want to show them that they can have an effective role. They have an effective role to play in conservation that can lead to some great successes.
Right. And I think about like a kid going to the zoo and they're seeing this animal and there's just pure joy when it like looks back at them, or there's that moment of seeing some cool behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the formative experiences that really do, I think, build conservationists. But we also are more aware now of eco anxiety and climate anxiety and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? It seems like it's not only anxiety and causing a lot of stress, but also like leading to apathy in some cases.
Oh my gosh, apathy and so much more. I was at home in Oregon last week, and we were talking about how sunny and nice it was, and having a really hard time being happy about it because we're like, well, if it's sunny now, it just means it's gonna be wildfires later this year. Like, it just like prevents us from being able to enjoy sunshine,
It's that
which is
SNL skit, the
it's
Debbie
the
Downer
Debbie
SNL
Downer,
skit. Yeah.
exactly. Which is just one of the funniest sketches, but so true that it's turned us into a bunch of Debbie Downers, and that's not getting a lot of people excited about our cause, because when I was talking to all these folks about sunshine and wildfires, nobody was like, "Man, I really wonder what I could be doing differently in my life to prevent that." Like, that's not, they're just feeling bad
Right.
about themselves. And so I think eco anxiety and climate anxiety, you made the joke about a conservation psychologist, like being a psychologist for conservationists. Like, we're the people most susceptible to those feelings, and it impacts our decisions to have children, our decisions on where to live, our decisions on what jobs to take. It has a great emotional impact, and I think it is something we need to at least pay close attention to and notice, recognize, and treat, instead of just letting it go unchecked.
Are there any examples you might draw on of something you're seeing at the Columbus Zoo, like a new exhibit or signage or a new approach to, some of the educational programs that are happening that kind of embody the balance of that hope
Yeah.
with the very real, like, there is help needed here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk a lot here about how successful conservation relies on conserving systems, not just individual elements of the system. So we try to weave a lot of human stories into our conservation work, talking not only about the animals that we're working to protect, but who are we working with to protect these animals, because none of it is stuff we're doing on our own by ourselves, and what those partnerships are doing for local communities. And so our Columbus Center for Wildlife, or Ohio Center for Wildlife Conservation, which is a building that is on grounds in our North America Trek exhibit, talks about four main creatures: freshwater mussels as a taxa, hellbenders, plains garter snakes, and American burying beetles. And, in the hellbender section, we literally have like a ticker of how many hellbenders we've released back into the wild through our partnerships, with a variety of different zoos, aquariums, government entities, nonprofits. And so people can see in real time, like, these are the animals that we are, and that they can see that while looking at our Hellbender labs and the head starting that's happening there. So it's
How many hellbenders
over
is it like
2,000.
over 2,000
Yeah.
hellbenders? Oh my gosh, that's super cool.
It is cool. It is cool. And they've got videos playing. So it's multimedia, so people can engage in whatever way they feel like speaks to their learning style. It is a quieter space than the rest of the zoo, especially on a crowded summer day. And I've been in there, and asked people, do you wish we had music? Do you wish we had sound effects? And they're like, no, this is the perfect space to reflect, think about conservation work, think about what you guys are doing. It's such a good break. So I think that's part of it too, is like, what is the ambiance we're creating when teaching some of these tough topics, or talking about our conservation work? Are we talk about this in the empathy work? There are environmental cues that we have given and socialized, like the Jaws theme song, that immediately, you know, immediately spark something in us that may be a different emotion than we originally intended. So thinking
Yeah,
about
it's in every nature
everything.
documentary. I feel
Yeah.
like is pretty much that I've watched, and even some like there was one I was watching that was like Hope for the Planet. Like it was trying to be hopeful, but it still had the obligatory, but everything's falling apart,
Yes.
and it's hard because like they're showing
You want
like
to establish a sense of the
yeah,
problem and its
yeah,
scope, but that is not motivating in and of itself.
right.
I think there's huge parallels to what's happening right now in our social world, right? That being able to give people actionable items that they can do that have clear connections to the change they want to see is paramount, because when you give people a ton of empathy and nowhere to take that empathy, they'll end up just emotionally boomeranging and going into self-preservationist behaviors, which is, again, the opposite of what we want.
Yes. Yeah, these things apply to any cause, not just conservation causes, right? The ideas of
Yes.
burnout, stress, and like trying to find community and realizing it's a systems issue. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just an individual issue. And also remembering where there has been progress as a way to inspire more change. So you talk about empathy. I'm curious, like, do you feel like you can teach empathy? Like, how do we,
You sure can.
okay, how do
Yeah.
you teach empathy, Kathy?
Yeah. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I was one of the original researchers, practitioners, whatever you want to call us, in the first round of the empathy work for the AZA when I was at Seattle Aquarium. And from that work, we came up with 6 best practices that you can use to drive empathy if empathy is your outcome of interest. Now, that's a big if. Empathy, like I mentioned, left unchecked, can be very dangerous. And empathy is not the right tool in our toolkit all of the time. If there is not that clear action component, I would actually say maybe drive towards a different affective or emotional outcome. Um, in your work. And so with those 6 best practices, I'm not going to go through every single one of them right now, but uh, they include things like providing rich sensory experiences that engage people in a variety, through sight, smell, sound, touch, etc. They also include increasing knowledge to the extent that it's necessary. We don't want people to have the wrong information about animals or to be kind of in the dark about what's happening, but we have to balance that against, or not even against, but alongside the creation of their emotions as well. And it also includes things like how we frame the conversations around animals. If we frame animals as it or unknowable others, that immediately shuts down an empathetic connection that we could be having. And we do that accidentally all the time. People refer to animals as it or some equally kind of othering pronoun or othering phrase, and that can really harm the empathy connection that we're trying to make, especially when it comes to non-charismatic animals.
Right. And I have noticed in my career that often the creatures that are less charismatic, snakes and or scary, snakes and spiders,
Mhm.
almost always I'd hear people refer to them as him pronouns.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I just switched it to she, her, right? Like referring
Mhm.
to, and I would
Yep.
just see the kids like look at me and they'd be like, wait,
What?
do you know it's a her? Is she?
Yes. Yes. We,
Well, either I could lie and say yes, or I could be like, actually, no, but we also don't know it's a he, like if it's
yeah.
something I don't know for sure. Um, but so it's interesting that and giving the names, right? Like the Disney effect, right?
Oh
And
my
I know
gosh.
zoos and science world in general has been against anthropomorphizing and some historical. I
Yeah.
wonder if that's changing in your
We
in
are starting to chip away. I mean, not even starting. We've been chipping away at that since the beginning of the Empathy Project. I remember when I was working camps, we never wanted to tell kids the names of the animals because we didn't want them to seem like our pets, right?
Mhm.
But I really don't know that that was the risk that we thought it was. I don't think anybody really thinks of like wolves as our pets or whatever.
Mhm.
But it instead created this kind of specimen versus human disconnect that we probably didn't intend. And so we've been also recommending that anthropomorphism be a tool in your toolkit, and that it is more important not to be anthropocentric, not to think that humans have all of the information and all of the experiences that you could possibly have on planet Earth, than it is to be anthropomorphic. We do have a lot in common with animals. We don't have everything in common with them, but it is really enriching to be able to find that overlap and mix that with knowledge gain. Because when we lack knowledge, we fill in the gaps with our own experiences. So the fewer gaps that you have, the more you're able to accept the experiences of others.
So for someone listening who's like got a kid or a student or someone in their life who absolutely hates whatever, you name it, like wasps,
Mm-hmm.
spiders, I'm sure snakes always come to like, have
Mm-hmm.
you been able to like, or have you seen programs that can build empathy for those types of creatures?
Totally. I have a big snake tattoo on my arm right here
Uh,
because I started out working with snakes when I was a teenager, and I didn't particularly like them that much. But when I thought about getting an animal tat, I was like, well, I'm going to start with snakes because they're the animals that nobody has empathy for. And I think that's like the most important place for us to go with this kind of work. Like, it's easy to have empathy for an otter or for an elephant, and not to say that's bad, but it's not a challenge, and it probably wouldn't have as strong of a positive effect as building empathy for a snake. And I would say my dragonfly students will laugh, because I often tell them to just start by naming the creature. So, like, there's a spider in your shower. What are you going to name her? And it like changes. It's all of a sudden it's not a spider in your shower. It's Francesca, who just came into your shower because it's warm and misty, and oops, she didn't realize you would also be using this space. So like, it sounds so silly, but it really creates, when you give an animal a name, you give them a narrative. And so you can all of a sudden talk not about all spiders in general, but about Francesca the spider who found her way
right.
into your
So name
house.
them, get the tattoo of them.
Get the tattoo of them.
Yeah.
I mean, touching is great. When I started working with snakes, and I was like in the snake house at the zoo or whatever, and um the number of people that were like, "Oh, slimy," like, and then they touch it and they're like, "Whoa, it's actually not slimy." Like that
Right.
immediately is like a tactile piece of information that they never had before.
Yeah.
And I
I
would
would
also
say,
say like involving children, like children who don't have that aversion yet. Like if the parent is freaking out, that's fine. They can have their moment, but I'll turn to the kid and be like, "Would you like to touch my friend George? He really loves being touched right here on his back. It's his favorite spot." And you're hard pressed to find a kid that's not even just a little bit curious.
right, right. I was going to say that's like touching bumblebees. And, when they're foraging for a flower, obviously, if you
Yeah.
are allergic or anything, you got to be careful. But like bumblebees are so fuzzy and so cute, and a very light touch when they're foraging
Mm-hmm.
on a flower is such a great way to make or help a kid, and a lot of times adults also, like realize this is not this thing that they thought it was.
It reprograms your brain.
Yeah.
And enough of
Yeah.
those experiences, and you can rewrite some of the pathways that, cause those damaging stereotypes. Goes for people
Nice.
too.
So, all right. I also want to talk to you, and I feel like you'll have a lot to say about social norms and social
Ooh,
change.
I love both of those things.
Okay. So I'm wondering if zoos can be a part of this change in social norms when it comes to conservation and when it comes to how we treat and
Yeah.
relate to animals, right? I think it's bigger than just, let's save the whales, let's save it's a total change in how we approach the
Hmm.
natural world. So that's sort of broad, but I kind of want to just
Yeah.
hand that to you and see what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is the highest and best use of a zoo at this point, is to be a connector first, and first of all, to be able to convene multiple partners around a conservation issue, but then to be able to tell stories of conservation in a way that rewrites the social paradigm, that because zoos are social learning spaces. I mean, Johnny Fraser and his colleagues wrote a book about the social value of zoos that I think is well worth a read, that talks about some of the science behind this, and the idea that people coming to a zoo are coming as part of a social group often, and the experience that they have is dictated by the way that social group navigates the experience. So whether that's a intergenerational social group, whether that's you and your friends, you on a date, you with your partner, you with your, I don't know, class, with your coworkers, it all, every experience is going to be different depending on who you visit with. And that's really interesting because it provides the challenge for us to be able to create spaces that can be navigated by many different social groups. And also, it creates the opportunity for people to come back multiple times and have a different experience each time, which is great because it's those multiple repeat experiences that helps us to rewrite some of these narratives around animals that we might otherwise not be able to. And so I think what we're really trying to do here is create social norms. People often talk to me about whether individual action matters, and I say, of course it does, because a collective is made up of individuals. And so no collective action is going to happen unless individuals are willing to act. And so we need to provide those opportunities for practice, behavioral rehearsal, knowledge gain, barrier removal for the individual action, and then show people how those actions scale with all the other people who are visiting, at least just the zoo, and showing how their action is woven into this larger fabric of social change.
It makes me think about the classic, knock on the glass moment at the zoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the social norm of this animal is here to entertain me. Thus, I will knock on the glass, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it will turn and look and
Yeah.
fulfill that role versus the person who's like, hey, we we don't do that, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't want to do that because it's disturbing the animal and it's disrespectful or it's whatever, all the
Mm-hmm.
reasons. So establishing different social norms of how we
Yes.
interact with species.
Yeah.
um and I also think about the conversation often like, oh, look at the lion, or look at the leopard or whatever, but it's like, what subspecies is that? What part of the world is it from? Like the person in the group that is
Yeah.
maybe actually reading the exhibit graphics and information, and sharing that with
Yeah.
cross
And they play
generation.
such an
And
important role. I mean, that's a social role in and of itself, right? If you're the kind of person who likes to teach things about animals to your friends or to your kid or whatever, I often, we can get really persnickety, the tiny science policeman on our shoulders or in our brains that my
Mhm.
colleague and I like to talk about really wants to be right all the time. And so we'll overhear someone in an exhibit say something like, this is a Siberian tiger, when actually it's, I don't know, some other an Amur tiger is, you know what I mean? Like they say the wrong, oh, okay. So they look at a caiman and they're like, look, it's a baby alligator. I would ask you, is it really important in that moment that you step in and be like, actually, that's a caiman? Like
It's true.
is that piece of information damaging?
All right, I would be that person potentially, but
And
yes,
I
I
think
hear
a
you.
lot of us are, and we have to step back and ask ourselves, like, is this actually just a bonding moment between a parent and a child, where the parent is demonstrating to their kid, who you don't know if this is the one weekend a month they get with them, or if they spend all their time coming to the zoo together, who cares? But like they're getting to teach their kid about animals, and eventually the kid will know it's a caiman, not an alligator, or they won't, and it's fine. And their lives don't really change. But if you step in and say, actually, it's a caiman, you're kind of undermining that entire social process. Now, it's very different if someone walks up to the elephants and they're like, man, it's really a bummer to see elephants in a cage. I will absolutely step in and be like, I would love to talk to you more about that. What do you see that makes you think that they're unhappy? And you can guide the conversation that way.
Totally, totally. And as a social scientist, I mean, I think, zoos have changed so much and
So much.
are no longer, the menageries and all of that, and are now these forces for conservation globally. But have you been able to measure this actual, like, the social change that is happening in people when they come to zoos or similar locations? I feel like you might have done just this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in cases, yes, there have been examples of this work being done on a case by case basis. We're actually doing a review right now of the AZA social science research agenda. And I think one of the things that's going to come out of that is that we don't have a ton of longitudinal work. I mean, color me surprised, not really, but longitudinal work is expensive, it's challenging, it takes obviously takes a long time before you get any return on that investment. And so in a lot of fields, I remember being in the School of Education, longitudinal studies in schools are very hard to come by. And so I think we need to think about whether we want to do some of those more broad, sweeping, larger scope studies as a field to be able to answer those questions more definitively, or if we're still at a point where we need to be understanding critical, you know, first level questions or second level questions about our visitors and about our um, social contract.
What would be like a first or second level versus like a longer term, more robust?
I mean, the longer terms are some of these things around how zoos and aquariums influence the learning ecosystem, social fabric of a community, and what are the roles that they play alongside other institutions, and really parsing out, because we are sometimes we're the tipping point, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we are just one piece in a person's learning. We are always one piece in a person's learning journey. But sometimes when we see, or someone says, man, I came to love animals because of the zoo. The zoo may have been the tipping point in that, but chances are there were a lot of other inputs in their lives that, whether they know it or not, slowly fed into that love of animals. And we take credit for all of it. So I think a higher level question would be trying to parse out what are the really unique pieces of the learning ecosystem that we can uniquely influence. I know I said unique twice in that sentence, but you
Super
um,
uniquely.
yeah, super uniquely. And I think the more basic questions that we have been answering all along are what learning techniques work. Um, a second level question: how do we effectively influence attitudes? I would love to see someone else take another affective outcome and give it the same treatment we gave empathy. So really digesting it, dissecting it, looking at it in all its component parts, and figuring out how that applies to a zoological context for something like discovery or curiosity would be fascinating. And then
Definitely. Yeah.
layering in all the DEI pieces, right? Like, a lot of the work that's been done has been done with majority populations, and we don't know what's different when it comes to populations from different backgrounds. And that might be something that's really worth investigating.
Yeah, how does a zoo open a door
Hmm.
to populations that otherwise may not be doing, going out to nature in other areas or traveling in certain places?
Yeah.
So that all ties to socioeconomics and
Yeah.
lots of variables.
Yeah.
So I think
And
we're
I
definitely,
think you said, zoos have evolved. Zoos are still evolving. I will often liken us to being in our teenage years, where we're not quite sure what we want to do when we grow up. We are starting to develop our sense of self, our independence, our understanding of who we are in this world, but we haven't fully gotten there yet. And so I think you'll hear similar conversations happening at a lot of facilities, but at the same time, that identity development is still very much in progress. And where we'll be in 10, 15, 20 years may look even more different than where we are now.
it is exciting to consider that. And I remember you saying something like that at the AZA conference in Tampa, I
Probably.
believe, like,
Yeah.
and it just got me thinking, like, what is the future of zoos and
Yeah.
botanical gardens and aquariums and all these things? It's going to be exciting.
It is. That's
But
why I'm here. Not because it's
yeah,
all been fixed, but because
yeah,
there's a lot of questions left unanswered. Questions we don't
totally.
even know to ask yet. That's why I paused when you asked that question. Because I was like, I mean, I could go down a litany of like cool social science questions that are being asked, but I think the most high order ones are ones that we haven't even figured out how to ask.
Yeah, maybe someone listening to this is thinking of them right now and will be in
I hope so.
contact. So you also teach our Earth Expeditions courses. So
Mhm.
just remind me, which courses have you taught and how's that been
Yeah.
for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I started teaching for Dragonfly in 2014. I finished my PhD in June and went on my first EE in July to Costa Rica. Uh, and I haven't stopped ever since. I think the only year I didn't teach was 2020 when none of us taught. And then there were 2 years I taught too. I did Belize and Baja back to back one year and Belize and Brazil back to back another year. So I've taught Costa Rica once, Mongolia once, Brazil twice, Baja 4 times, and Belize 5 times.
Wow,
And
that
I'm doing
is
Borneo this year. So it'll be my first time going on a new EE since like 2017,
so
which is
exciting. So
very exciting.
exciting when we
Yeah.
get to be new to it as well, even as the instructor, and just experience it
Yeah.
along with everyone.
Yeah. And one of my former students will be teaching with me. So that'll be a lovely full circle
Oh,
moment.
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I've been thinking about with Earth Expeditions sorts of field courses, like what is it that is so powerful about being in these really like sort of challenging and intense, but in a good way experiences, like going into a new culture, being around new food and new people and new languages, and
Yeah.
then you're also like potentially out in a, it might start raining when you're out in the field somewhere.
Yeah.
um I mean, what do you think it is that's so like transformative and powerful about those experiences?
I don't think it's just one thing. I tell my students at the beginning of every EE that this is the only time in the entire history and future of the world that this group of humans will be all together in this place right now. Like you'll stay friends, you may have reunions, but you're never going to all be together in the lobby of a Holiday Inn getting ready to embark on an Earth expedition down to Baja. Like that. It's the presence that instills that stop and notice who you are in this moment, stop and notice what you're feeling. Really appreciate the novelty and the temporariness of this moment. Not that it's temporary in a bad way, but that it's temporary in a necessary way. And then I often tell them to remember that not a single soul here knows who you are. We don't know what you're like at home. We don't know if you're, you know, a good friend or you've been dropping the ball a lot lately, or if you're the most popular person in your office, or if you're really struggling to find your footing. Like, we don't know or really care about any of that. You get the opportunity to kind of rewrite your the way people see you in this experience, and that's extremely rare. We never get that. And then layer on top of it another piece that almost no one is completely comfortable in this environment, not even your instructors. Like, I'm super nervous for Borneo. It's going to be the hottest I've ever been. I don't have leech socks. Like, what are we doing? But like, you learn to be uncomfortable and
And
you
you're
learn how to,
willing, you're
and you're
showing that
willing.
courage, right? So the people
Yeah.
that sign up have that, they might be scared, but they have that courage too. And one thing that I think is interesting, like going back to psychology, conservation psychology, or just psychology generally, like a lot of what you're saying kind of assumes that people are malleable, that they can
Hmm.
change who they are like a little bit.
Hmm.
And I know I often say the same thing you do at the start of any Earth expeditions. I say like, we can be whoever we want on this, but I
Yeah.
then sometimes wonder like, is that actually true for everyone, or are some people more stuck and that's harder for them?
Mhm. It depends. It depends on whether you see yourself as change is a choice, right? Do you see yourself as someone who can try new things? Do you see yourself as someone who's, you know, stuck in your ways? And I've seen, at this point, hundreds of students on all ends of that spectrum or all areas of that spectrum. I'm not saying completely rewrite your personality to go on an EE, but ask yourself, like, okay, what if I was the kind of person who tried a new food and didn't complain about it? Like, what would that look like? Maybe we just start with that, like trying things. Or like, what if I was the kind of person who was okay being sweaty? Like, what if I just was okay being sweaty and realized it wasn't the end of the world? It's like little things like that.
Maybe just don't be a Debbie Downer, man.
Yeah, I mean, I also have my number one rule on any of my Earth expeditions is don't come to me with a complaint if you don't also have a solution. So no opposition without proposition. Like if you are
That's a
really
good life strategy.
truly like we are all hot. We have all been eating goat for the last 7 days. But
Yeah.
also we are surrounded by so much beauty. I'm not saying like we have to toxic positivity it, but I think there is something about these experiences in recognizing that nobody is alone in their discomfort. And that once you kind of understand that and you realize, like, I can't change the temperature, I
Mhm.
can't change the food. Like, if I just if I cease to try to control everything around me, what could I gain with that mental space that is now
Right.
freed up and available
Yeah.
for new
And you know
experiences?
what? If you're a little bit late getting to a location one day and
It's fine.
you're a little hungry, right? Like for
Yeah.
me in my personal life, I'm almost never hungry because we can get food all the time, but like,
Hmm.
oh, this is a good experience for Kevin to be.
Yeah.
It's okay. I can be hungry for an hour while we're waiting to get through traffic to the next location or what have
Yeah.
you. Um, so yeah,
And,
we all have
and
things
if
to
that's
learn.
like a very challenging thing for you, bring snacks.
Yeah, yeah,
There's some level of like it's so funny on Earth expeditions because you create this like group mentality, and I think even the strongest leaders, adults, when they are not the one in charge, kind of lose their sense of agency, and they're like, how would I possibly function? And so in every Earth expedition, you have to remind people like you are the master of your own destiny. If you would like to bring snacks with you, you can bring snacks with you. Like we'll tell you like what is and
yeah.
isn't okay. And I don't blame anyone for that. It's just a very funny trend to see. And I mean,
There's
in my
often way too many snacks. Like we have
way too many
gone snack
snacks.
overboard. Baja is the one where it
Oh my God.
goes
Yeah.
snacks are everywhere, and that one, like
Yeah.
Megan's got them flying around the van. So
Yeah. And if you have an opportunity to pee, do it.
yeah.
Like, don't wait. Don't ask for permission. Go use the washroom. I promise you, you won't regret it. Like, it's funny. In my 13 Earth expeditions, we've had a hurricane. We've had just the gamut of like, I was stung by a tarantula hawk. A bunch of us were stung by jellyfish. Like, there's just so many. Girl broke her toe. Like, we've all sorts of experiences. Heat stroke. We got through it. Like the medical emergencies, we figured them out. We worked together as a team. Miami's got a great
Right.
support
And
system in
guess what?
place.
At home, those things happen too. I
Yeah.
mean, people you trip and you twist your ankle. You have there's so many things that can happen no matter where you are. But
Yeah.
there is something about the group getting through it, all these new things hitting you, the opportunity for some gentle re what's the word, like recreation of
Yeah.
who you are, or maybe exploration is the right word.
Mhm.
um
Exploration. Yeah.
hey, so I have this new part of the podcast that I've been trialing, which is the Dragonfly Reflections, because we'll be
Oh.
getting reflections. So I kind of want to wrap up with that. So the first one I was going to just ask you is there any moment from Kathayoon as a kid or a teen or something, a moment maybe with an animal, maybe a museum visit or something that happened in your life that um where you felt like the empathy switch kind of flipped for you? Like you just were like, huh, this is really
Hmm.
powerful.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many formative moments. I remember getting my first pet. I was obsessed with cats from like day one of life in on planet Earth. And getting to touch and hold my first kitten when I was 7 was like I just felt a sense of responsibility and joy that I never have felt since. But it was just like pure, unfettered love for this little critter. And I've had cats ever since, and I love them all very much. I also remember working at the zoo as a teen and not quite knowing what I wanted to do with my life, but realizing at some point that someone ran that place, that like people worked there as their jobs. Like it kind of, but you're like, no, this is someone's like actual career. And so not so much empathy for animals, but empathy for those people and wanting to learn more about what it's like to have a career at a zoo was a profound moment for me, obviously, now being in this field for the rest of my life, hopefully. That was a really big kind of eye-opening experience that I don't know I would have had I not been exposed to people who did this job for money for their lives.
So I love the picture of the cat and this little kitten.
It was
Uh,
so cute. I loved her so much. It turns out my parents didn't actually even intend for us to keep the cat. She just like my mom was like, have a kitten at her birthday party. She'll love it. And then I was like, it's my new cat. My parents were like,
oh, did you get to keep it?
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What was
There was
what was her
no taking that cat out of my sight.
okay. What was her name?
Kitty. I was
Hmm.
7,
Oh,
so
there you go. Yep. Go
yeah.
with it.
Yep.
All right. And then you talked about working at zoos, and obviously, like
Mhm.
you've built this career. So this with all these different institutions in Seattle, Oregon, New England. Now you're in Ohio. Um, but I mean, are there something or that you're super proud of with your work with these institutions that you feel you are contributing that is really moving the needle in a good way?
I think the empathy work was big for that for me, especially coming out of a PhD. And I think a lot of folks come out of PhDs being like, "Whoa, what now?" But having something else that got my brain excited was huge. And I also think the evaluation piece, I am like there were people doing wonderful evaluations well before I came into this field, and I learned from them. And um, I've made it my mission to bang that drum over and over again and get people thinking about how to evaluate the outcomes of their programs, the fact that we need evaluation, it's a need to have, not a nice to have. The things we think are just happy byproducts of our work can actually be measured, and those measurements can direct our future efforts. I am happy to not be doing evaluation as my job anymore, but I am very proud of the work I did in evaluation
Hmm.
from like 2008 to 2019 or so, to kind of bring that, to elevate that
Yeah.
message.
Yeah. And the book you wrote, remind me the name and you had a
Practical
co-author too.
evaluation for conservation education and outreach.
All right. It's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon, but if you don't use Amazon, it is also on Roman Littlefield's website, or I think Rutledge at this point. Yeah,
It's a great book.
thank you.
I think Trevor Mia was the first one to
Oh,
mention it to me when I had him on the podcast, and then
good.
I ordered it, and it's yeah, definitely have used that. So
Yeah.
yeah, congratulations on that. All right, last reflection question is there any this is kind of hard because right now it's so snowy and miserable here in Ohio, but it's about time in nature. Any moments you've had in the last few weeks, a moment in nature that brought you joy?
Yes. So, like I said, I kind of try still to spend a lot of time back in Oregon. My partner still lives there. We still have our house there. My parents are there. My friends. And so I was there last weekend and a bunch of friends. So I'm a runner. training for a marathon right now, which is really great conditions for training. Let me
Oh
tell
my God.
you, the last 2 days of running have been the literal worst. But I got invited to do this end-to-end trail run in Portland that it's 11 miles long and it starts at one end of a trail and goes all the way to the downtown core or like near the downtown core. And so I've done it twice, two other times. We try to do it like at the beginning of each year just because it's really nice to start the year with something like that. It's entirely in the forest. It's super gorgeous. And this year, last year when we did it on January 1st, 2025, it was sleeting, disgusting. Bleh, we like didn't want to stop at all because it was too cold. And this time it was like 45. Like it was a little chilly, but the sun was shining. It was just we all stood outside afterwards at the coffee shop and it was like, wow. Oh, I just love sun so much. And it was just so nice to be in the forest again and having done that trail a few times now, be like, oh, I remember this spot. Oh yeah, this is where we should stop and have our nerds clusters or whatever. And it was just a lovely time with some running gals chatting and enjoying the forest.
I love it. I love that it was social, it was nature, it's the
Yes.
runner's high, it's connecting to
Yes.
a place in your past. Like it kind of ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, to the point that like we finished the 11, we are like, let's run down to this coffee shop that makes it 12. And then one girl was like, well, I kind of want to get to 13 now. And I was like, I'll do that with you. Like it just felt good to be outside as opposed to right now.
Hiding as we are
Yeah.
currently. Um, wow, that's great. Well,
Mhm.
Kathayoon, thank you so much for sharing all these interesting stories and all your research and
Yeah,
work. It's really incredible.
of course. Thanks so much for having me. Always happy to chat dragonfly and social science and conservation psychology and all that stuff.
Definitely, definitely. Let's just keep trying to make the world a better place, figure out these social norms and
That's the
all that.
goal. Leave it better than you found it.
Hi there, folks. Just one more thing before you head on out. If you have a moment, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear in what ways you are finding this podcast useful, how you listen, what you would like to hear more of, less of, etc. Please feel free to send me any and all feedback, any ideas for guests, etc. to Kevin Matteson at my email, which is matteskc@miamioh.edu. That's spelled MATTESKC @miamioh.edu. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day.